So in this podcast, we're going to talk about standardization, which is a very interesting topic because it kind of feeds into the entire movement with our industry, I guess, moving away from construction and building into processing and manufacturing, I guess.
Standardization of what?
Standardization of, well, as much as we can, I guess, to an extent, right? So, yeah, we can talk about information and data. We could talk about the construction elements that we build with also.
Like modular, for example, being one of them.
Off-site construction, for example. But
the process, not how something is executed, which, we've been kind of building the same way since forever.
Yeah.
But also the process as per how do we produce the project, the information, the project material, the design,
One of the big things about construction is I guess, how archaic it is, how old it is. You mentioned we build in the same way, and we have been building in the same way for hundreds of years, right? Materials have changed, and technology has driven how we build. So we build much faster now than we did 50 or 100 years ago. But we haven't really standardized how we build. Foundations are still different depending on the engineer and the calculations. Windows and facades are different. If we talk about just information and how we design it differs depending on individuals and teams and companies. And so our entire industry is completely and utterly fragmented when compared to other industries of production, because we produce, right? But so do pharmaceuticals, so do the motor industry, so do food. And all of those industries operate in lines of production. Whereas the construction industry, we don't really look at it as production, we look at it as construction.
Yeah. Something I find bizarre, now that you mentioned the food industry, is that we have gone a step forward. We now have standardized ingredients on the label of products. We know nutritional information, for instance. Yeah. And that's something kind of new, because we have started labeling products not long time ago, right?
Yeah.
But we've been building and constructing since forever, even if it's on paper wise,
Yeah.
And it's so difficult to find any type of information related to construction on the internet. It's just not there, like constructive sections, information related to geometry, facade ratio against flooring, amounts, quantities of elements into different type of buildings, even if it's only residential, which is the most common type of building we have in a city.
I guess the reason for that is, well, it's twofold, right? Is that the information has never been digitized, meaning that it's very difficult that it's available online.
It's not digital, yeah.
People consider information to be within the industry, valuable. So it's not actually public knowledge, even if you consider our public buildings.
Confidential
perhaps,
or?
It's very difficult to find information relating to existing buildings under construction, but buildings that have obviously been constructed.
Or maybe it's because there is no value on having that information, because you don't really know what you are looking at, right? Like you may receive that information, but if you don't have clarity to what are you actually reading, then what is the point of using it more than leading to misinformation and actually, misleading on how it's used, isn't it?
But I guess we don't look at the construction information as being valuable information anymore. Maybe, or we have never looked at it as construction
historical information, you mean?
Yeah. Historical information. So we talk a lot about in our podcast series about linear processes and the construction industry being linear. So even in terms of information and standardization, it's also linear, right? So at the end of the project, we metaphorically box everything up and we put it in storage. Whereas
literally,
kind of literally, not metaphorically, literally. Okay, let's talk. Like even the OMC requirements, the operational maintenance documentation, that all needs to be, it used to be printed, and I'm sure there still were clients and companies printing out the operational and maintenance requirements for the buildings. It's huge amount of information.
Or
manually, that manual, exactly, that needs to be stored somewhere. Whereas now, I guess, because we can digitize information, there's now this understanding that perhaps we can analyze and reuse that information in future projects to learn and to become more smart in one sense, but also have more information to make those decisions necessary in order to drive better quality. We're talking about information a lot here, and standardization, yes, within information is very important. We could be as simple and talk about cost management and cost information. Where do you go for real-time cost data in the industry? Does that exist? You know, we have databases and so on individually in our organizations, I guess, but
I see it a little as what is first, the chicken or the egg. In regards to digitalize something, you need to have data that you can rely on. You need to be able to compare and to put together data that you know is relatable and is comparable. But to do that, you need to standardize. But I also see that in construction, in our industry, we don't see the value of standardizing because we don't see the purpose of it. We don't see why is that needed at all. So I think that the lack of standardization is slowing down the digitalization of the processes.
Absolutely.
And because we are not digitalizing, we haven't been aware yet of how important it is actually to standardize the data, the information, the processes, the way we collect, archive, produce, and share that information, that content, you know.
But I guess then the reason for us not realizing that is, again, our construction process is linear. We get to the end, we hand over information, and we move on to the next project where we start. It's a bit crazy, actually. We start again at the very beginning on the next project, and then we begin to build the bank of information, and then we get to the end of the project and we box it up, we put it in the basement, and we start again. It seems absolutely crazy that you would spend years building and collecting this valuable information, and then you don't use it for anything. Isn't that kind of mad?
But at the same time, we build the same, right? It's like we are always following the same cooking recipe.
Yeah, the recipe.
Recipe, sorry. The same cooking recipe, but and we are building the same, but at the same time, we are just like we have that feeling that we are building the same, but at the same time we are not really, because we are approaching projects
differently,
depending on which team you're working with, depending on, you know,
but,
so many other factors that we are not really producing the same in the same way, and definitely we are not learning from previous experiences on trying to improve
in a local sense,
processes.
But even in a global sense, like learning locally would be a huge advantage, I think, but we're not doing that. And learning globally would transform our industry completely. Now, I know our topic here is standardization, and we start talking about information, but information is no good unless you can read it standardized. Because we talked in a previous podcast about digitalization and digitization, and standardization and information is key if you can analyze large quantities of it quickly to get a result. Standardization and information doesn't help if a human eye needs to read vast quantities of information, because you will not be able to see the wood from the trees in that situation. It's just too much information, which is why we probably haven't done it.
No, and it also leads to interpretation. So if something needs to be processed by a human, it's because it's not clear and it cannot be comparable unless you validate it. So what we need to achieve is a way of collecting and producing information that is validated at the moment of production, and it doesn't need to be processed later on to adjust it or convert it or
So
be manipulated
it,
be manipulated in a way that cannot be automated by a machine in that way. Otherwise you will be leading to errors and forgetting to do that extra step, extra mile in order to analyze that information.
Because to retrofit it, you have to manually do something with it. and that only opens up the door to more errors and misinterpretation, as you mentioned. So I guess we're at that transition period right now where we realize that information is of huge value to us, because we're beginning to use a lot of digital tools and digital processes within our daily work environment. We're now understanding that standardization is obviously key to collecting information and analyzing information, meaning that again, ICMS, International Construction Measurement Standards, it's a standard cost breakdown structure for measuring cost within the construction industry. I'm personally of the opinion that every quantity surveying practice in the world should be using the standard, but not every QS practice, but actually every organization that deals with construction costs.
Yeah, well, every single project will have a cost, right?
Yeah.
So it's about of actually stating clear requirements on what standards need to be followed on your project, and the way to make it the most flexible as possible is actually to state an international standard, because you are not going to be limited to national requirement involving that maybe some teams are not familiar with it. Ideally, in today's century, we should have something at an international scale. Every single project has a cost, and all the costs are going to be the same for a building, no matter where you build it. Now, you will have different currencies, you will have different prices, prices, values, but everything is going to have a cost at the same.
But if you can standardize the structure of the cost information, you can always add in these variables of fluctuation, whether it's indexation or inflation, whether it is cross-border currency adjustments, it doesn't matter, but you need the commercial information to be standardized in order to be able to analyze that.
Not only for your construction direct works, right? Here there is also, we will be looking at, the project fees, the designer's fees, the connection fees, the running cost in order to actually take smart decisions when we are building, to make buildings more efficient and more sustainable,
and to lower their costs, right? So that we can inject more value into other parts of society. Again, it's a running theme within these podcast series we're doing, is increasing value for society at large, right? And buildings themselves, they're inefficient in how we construct them, they're inefficient in terms of how we manage them, and they're inefficient in terms of how we deconstruct them. So the entire industry at the moment is inefficient. So in order for us to improve on that, standardization is key. It has to be it's an easy change to make, I think. Again, it's small changes, right? We're not talking big changes, just small changes to help with the process. And it's going to be over a long period of time in order for us to get like the manufacturing industry, I guess.
Small changes we were referring before as the ones, for example, that are in our hands, in the hands of the individuals that are working in the industry. I think that in order to standardize, in this case, it can be driven by individuals, but it should not be limited by individuals, because it won't make a real value. I think in this regard, it actually might be done the other way around, so from the top down. In regards to that's actually the easiest, where you start standardizing a small, like the very little information that gets to the top, start standardizing that, and then start actually drilling and expanding the requirement as per how do you standardize the more detailed aspects and pieces of information and data that are produced in.
So you're saying that it needs to be somehow industry or government driven to standardize the industry or the information, at least to that degree, right?
Yeah, and they are actually the ones that have the easiest way of connecting with other governments, right? Yeah. If they were to join forces and identify the needs and actually agree on the very high level of standardization, propose.
So basically we're calling out government here to say, guys, and girls, you it's your responsibility here and to drive value in our industry. We're going to try to do it as individuals, but you guys need to come out and really enforce this. Like, if we reflect on the Danish construction industry over the last number of years, the amount of reports coming out in the paper about costs running over, budgets going absolutely through the roof, and kind of we're on the ground here in a company that specializes in cost management, but still you don't see any policy coming out of government saying, you know, we need cost specialists on our projects to manage cost. We can't continue in this way. All we have is the same story going around and around the table about that, you know, these issues we have in the industry, but there is zero solutions put on the table in order to drive that. So I think standardization is a part of that, and you know, government and industry bodies have to put up their hand for change.
Not ambitious at all, huh?
No, but it's an important aspect of it, right? So like we talk about a problem and we keep talking about it, and we'll keep talking about it, and then we talk about it with different people, and but the problem is the same, and we keep talking about it. There's no solutions being given here, and I think what we would like to talk about is change and disruption and doing something different in order to create more value. So standardization within our industry, even if it's just standardization to say we need more specialists of this nature on projects, or we need these type of standards now implemented in our industry, or we need to be transparent and open about construction costs and processes, especially on public projects. It means that we change how we view the project or the construction industry right now.
And I suppose that at our level as individuals, right, there is need to commit to that. There is need to accept that, you know, that's going to be slightly different as how we work with it, but that we need to contribute to that by actually, you know, committing and accepting that different way of producing the information. Ideally understanding what is the way and how is that going to be used. So to do that, of course, you need to ask, you need to seek answers of how is my information going to be used by other stakeholders in the future stages, and how it can be reused for my next project.
I guess what we're trying to say to people that are listening here is you need to consider how you work with the information you have. Is it standardized? Have you considered standardization? Is standardization something that you're talking about within your organization now? And if not, why not? And then I suppose the next important message is that if you are beginning to standardize, look for global standards. Don't try to build your own standard, because your own standard, if we all have our own standards, there's no standard. We have to have a global industry standard. It's the only way that we can really achieve better quality within the industry, I guess, right? But another point I wanted to make actually was within standardization, we're talking about information now. But if we look at the construction industry, and especially apartment construction, standardizing certain aspects of apartments, something I noticed when I came to Denmark, which was really cool, I thought, was stair cores, precast element stair cores. Those dimensions are standardized. We actually don't do that in Ireland. We in situ our stair cores if they are concrete, and then we tile on top of that. And I think that's just absolutely bizarre. So I really love the way that the Danish industry had standardized certain stair cores. And the other standardization that I found really cool here in the Danish industry is windows. The windows in the Danish industry, housing, I'm talking about now, one-off housing, have standardized their window types. And I found that kind of really refreshing. So when you are refurbishing your house or you're doing something, you can pick from whatever standard windows in your house. It doesn't have to be specially made up. Small little changes there have very large impact also on cost.
Do you think that it may have been because of cost precisely, that labor is quite expensive in these Nordic countries, and so it is material. So by actually standardizing the process of windows and by standardizing the product itself and just arriving, install, and minimizing the labor on site as it may be compared to in situ, it is actually something that has been driven because of cost, proving that it's actually more efficient to
And
standardize and utilize always the
it
same
absolutely
methods.
supports our argument here for standardization, right? And digitization. You can also just buy your windows online by selecting the type you wanted to, and they'd be delivered to your door, right? You don't need anybody to come out and measure. You don't need anything like that. It's a very simple example of how digitization and standardization improves quality and reduces cost, because the windows are now manufactured. They're not constructed or built. They're manufactured in a factory.
And it simplifies the understanding of it, right? If you have to dig through an entire catalog of products, it's no longer only selecting the material. It's also taking into account so many other factors that you don't understand, and that they may be displayed in totally different ways. Going back to the ingredient list on your labels in the food products, right?
So apartment construction. Why can't we standardize the size of apartments and build in that way, and use a standardized geometry for walls, windows, doors, bathrooms, and build our apartment blocks in that way? So we end up manufacturing the apartment blocks in a global sense. Yes, certain different cities have different sizes and so on. We understand that, and needs and everything, but
that will allow to modularization. But I suppose that some people and a lot of people may see this as a lack of creativity. Everything will look more or less the same, right? I suppose that it will,
in terms of
and that is good for data,
like
to see
anyway,
data,
right?
to see data looking all the same.
Yeah.
It makes it much simpler, so you don't need to get used to understand and learn how to read the data, because you are used to read it always the same way. You know where to find it, what it means. It makes everything much more simple and easier.
Yeah.
But I suppose that if you apply that to everybody dressing the same clothes, we standardize the sizes, right? And the clothes are totally different. But it's about it may lead to a bit of controversial topic there, right?
Yeah,
Everything will look the same.
An architectural perspective, you could say, yeah, we don't want it the same, we want it different. But from a construction perspective, you could modularize the entire kind of construction aspect, the services aspect, and the facade aspect to a degree, and then you have different material solutions, of course, which offers the design to it. The challenge we have in our industry right now is that we're not building enough accommodation in our major cities. We don't have enough labor to facilitate the construction of that. We have to do something different. It's not a case of if we want to or not. We have to do something different. So manufacturing, quote unquote, flat pack apartments would facilitate a lot of that, because we could build it quicker. It could be built with less labor intensive requirements because they're manufactured as opposed to constructed.
Higher quality in that
And higher
regard,
quality.
because it will be a more secure process and more controlled process. And potentially more sustainable, because that will allow to actually collect and identify and test the impact of all these materials and minimize the production costs.
And sustainability, as you're kind of leading towards there, if we can reduce the material, the waste aspect, because we standardize, because we modularize, then we can also have a bigger impact on the environment, in the materials we use, and so on. So standardization, I think, has an awful lot of values. Again, the water industry has standardized an awful lot of what they do, but you can see that in the different car types that the different models that the companies make. But they're the same chassis, they're the same elements, they're the same sub base. It's just they look different from the outside, right? It's just.
So we should standardize everything except facades and painting, or
for apartment construction. Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah. You've blank canvas to do what you like internally, but standardization. But I guess the issues is the size of plots, the size of the Biegefeld or the land, and so on that we build on, so on and so forth. But standardization has to be something that we need to consider in our daily work environment, for sure. It's not just about standardization of information. It's not standardization about our structures that we use. It's standardization across the entire industry, including the elements that we build with, and the processes that we use, and how we plan, so that we, again, come back to the linear aspect and we try to turn it circular, so that if we standardize, we can get better. We reuse our standards, meaning that we get better at the process, we get better at the quality, we get better at the sustainability, we get better at the cost. The end result is just better. Thanks very much for listening. There's a LinkedIn link below in the show notes. We would love to connect with you.
We hope you enjoyed it and have you with us in the next one. Thank you very much.